Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. This Tuesday, we discuss the politics over energy. It's an old story, really. Wars have been fought over oil, sanctions have been imposed over nuclear energy, and lectures given over the use of coal. Tonight, we tell you how the West doesn't follow the rules it wants others to abide by. We'll also discuss the war on TikTok. Western governments are waking up to the threat. They say TikTok steals data. Sure, it does, and should be banned. But what about Silicon Valley tech giants? Do they not steal data? Or are they the good thieves? Nepal's government is falling apart again. It's an old story with old players and the same old plot. But the citizens of Nepal are paying a big price for its replay. In other news, Macron is going to Africa with a new pitch. Muslims in Europe are being asked to boycott dates from Israel. And more people are apparently going on holiday just to sleep. We'll tell you all about it. The headlines first. Intense fighting continues in Bakhmut in Ukraine, a city in the Donetsk region that Russia has been trying to seize for months. Kiev says the situation is extremely tense as Ukraine's intel chief dismisses claims of China arming Russia. Nigeria's ruling party candidate Bola Tinubu takes an early lead in the race for the presidency after a tight election marked by delays and claims of fraud. Sri Lanka bans strikes in several key sectors as protests against the government spread. Colombo is cutting spending and raising taxes to secure an IMF loan. Unions are protesting. They'd call for a one-day national strike tomorrow. Taking a break from his missile-firing spree, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un orders officials to engineer what he calls a fundamental transformation in agriculture. Pyongyang is suffering acute food shortage. Reports say many could be dying of hunger. Hong Kong finally drops its mask rule. Almost 1,000 days after the pandemic mandate was imposed, it was one of the last places in the world to enforce mask wearing when outside, with violators facing hefty fines. And the UK's Labour Party plans to give menopausal women paid time off. Research says about 1 in 10 women aged 45 to 55 left their jobs last year due to lack of workplace support. Tonight, we want to talk about the politics of energy and how the West plays games that only they can win. How they make the rules that suit them and break the rules when it suits them and sit in judgment of others who don't follow their lead. Oil, nuclear, coal, all kinds of energy fuels power games. Tonight, let's focus on coal. Every time coal is brought up, India is painted as the villain. I want you to look at some of the recent headlines. This is from the Washington Post. It says, the world's second largest consumer of coal is not ready to give up despite urgent concerns about the toll it is taking on the climate. This one talks about India invoking an emergency law. This is to increase coal energy output. Rewind further and you'll see more such headlines. This one is from 2020. UN chief warns India over bad economics of coal. The UN Secretary General wanted India to dump coal. Here's another one from 2021. France 24 says India's need for cheap fuel behind its push for compromise on coal. They were talking about what happened at the climate summit, COP26. The report said India led the charge to weaken anti-coal pledges. A few months later, the war began, the one in Ukraine. Europe needed energy. Let me show you how the story changed. Britain fired up its coal plants again. So did Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, and Greece. Now who's weakening anti-coal pledges? Who is betraying the planet? Coal politics is a shining example of Western hypocrisy. They demand obedience on climate pledges. They admonish the global South for using coal. But when they themselves face an energy crunch, they fire up coal plants again. And in some instances, they even export their energy crisis. Tonight, we'll expose this hypocrisy. We'll tell you how the West is keeping its lights on at the cost of the developing world. Last year, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe was in a state of panic. The continent feared it will not have enough energy. There were predictions of a brutal, punishing winter. As it turned out, Europe survived, How do you think that happened? Because Europe turned to coal. Countries like Germany restarted 27 coal plants. They were shut down in the name of fighting climate change earlier. Now they're back online. Berlin wants to keep using them at least till next year, and Germany is not alone in doing this. The list of countries turning to coal includes the United Kingdom, Finland, Italy, Greece, France, Spain, Belgium, and the Netherlands. They all resorted to coal power in some form or the other. They also rationed energy, and the winter turned out to be milder than predicted, so Europe sailed through. But its double standards were obvious. When its own energy security came under threat, Europe dumped the climate promises and jumped back to coal. And here's something else that I must tell you. This involves the G7, the group of the 7 biggest economies in the world. They made a decision in May last year. The G7 decided to stop funding fossil fuel projects. At the same time, they were making appeals to West Asian powers. You may remember this awkward fist bump. That's Joe Biden meeting Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The US president wanted to make Saudi Arabia a pariah. But when global oil prices shot up, he went all the way to Riyadh to get the Saudis to pump more oil. So much for principles. Riyadh did not budge. And when diplomacy did not work, the West threw money at the problem. It bought energy supplies, whatever it could get its hands on, leaving the rest of the world to deal with shortages. Take Europe again. When Russia cut off its gas supplies, the bloc bought up whatever it could find. And guess who had to suffer? Asia, countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Philippines. They were left scrambling for energy. And that is how you export an energy crisis. You buy everything that's on the market, and the rest have to deal with it. Just buy everything you can, leaving others to deal with the shortages. That's exactly how we ended up with climate change in the first place. The West created the problem. It enriched itself through massive exploitation of fossil fuels. And now it is dumping the problem on the developing world. First, they push one-sided climate pledges, and then they squeeze supplies out of the energy markets. They make the rules, but don't necessarily follow them. They still remain among the worst polluters. In fact, I have some numbers. India has 17% of the world's population, but it generates just 7% of the world's carbon dioxide. Now look at the rest. The United States, less than 5% of the world's population, but the US accounts for 15% of the emissions. China is a new economic power, 18.5% of the world's population, 27% of the world's emissions. This is the rich world's climate hypocrisy. They buy and use more oil and coal while telling the developing world to rely on sunshine and wind. You see, there's no denying climate change and its implications on our world. This is serious. But unequal rules and unfair demands on others is no way to fix it. And speaking about hypocrisy, let's shift focus to the war on TikTok. It's open, it's hostile, and it's hypocritical. The West is gunning for TikTok. Over the past few weeks, it has banned TikTok across the Atlantic. On what grounds? TikTok steals data. That's what millions of TikTok users are being told, and it's a fair point. TikTok comes from China. It is owned by a company called ByteDance. And there is a legitimate threat of TikTok sharing your data with the Chinese government. So it does pose a threat. But is it alone? Don't all social media platforms steal data? Also, concerns over TikTok have been around for a while, so why is it being banned now? Tonight we'll discuss. First, let's tell you which countries are going after TikTok. The US comes first. The White House has given a deadline to government agencies, a deadline to scrub off TikTok from all federal devices and systems. It should be removed from all government devices, and this should be done in the next 30 days. Up north, Canada has blocked TikTok too. For now, the ban is only for government employees and government devices. Hear it from the horse's mouth.
We're making the decision that for government employees, for government equipment, it is better to not have them access TikTok because of the concerns that people have in terms of safety. This may be a first step. It may be the only step we need to take, but every step of the way, we're going to be making sure we're keeping Canadians safe.
Meanwhile, Canadian privacy regulators have launched an investigation. They'll probe how TikTok handles the data of its users. So more action could be coming. Across the Atlantic, TikTok is facing a hard time in Europe. The European Commission has banned the use of TikTok for all of its staff. They cannot use the app neither on their personal nor on their corporate devices. Why has the European Commission taken this step? To protect data and increase cyber security, it says. And how many employees will be affected by this ban? More than 32,000. They've all been given a deadline. Remove TikTok from your phones, from your devices by the 15th of March. And if the US is doing it, if Canada and Europe are doing it, how can the United Kingdom not do it? Surprisingly though, London is yet to join the banned TikTok bandwagon, but it's under pressure to hop on. And soon it might. Lawmakers in the ruling Conservative Party want action against the Chinese app. In fact, I have a quote from the chair of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. This is what he says. "We run the risk of being marooned as a tech security laggard among free and open nations." So London's case is that of FOMO, fear of missing out, which brings us back to the question, why is the West coming together to take on TikTok? Their big concern is the Chinese law, a law that requires all Chinese companies to assist the government when asked to. And assist how? Well, in the case of tech companies, assist by providing any and all data that Beijing wants. What's worse, last year TikTok made an admission. It said that some of its staff in China could access user data. So if the Chinese government asks for data, TikTok will have to give it. And how much data are we talking about? Data 1 billion users. In the US alone, TikTok has over 113 million active users. In Canada, about 8.3 million people, and around 26% of all adults are on TikTok. What about Europe? As of last year, about 228 million people in Europe were using TikTok. The growth of this app has been phenomenal. After its global launch, it took just 9 months to add 100 million users. 9 months for 100 million users for TikTok. Do you know how long it took for Instagram to achieve that? 2.5 years. What about revenues? TikTok's revenues are projected to hit $18 billion this year. That will be a jump of 55% from last year. By 2024, TikTok's revenues could reach $23 billion. And that's still nowhere close to the hundreds of billions that Meta and Google mint. But it's a threat nonetheless. It's a threat to American tech companies. Meta, for example, has a lot of reasons to worry. Last year, Meta's ad revenue fell for the first time since 2012. Meta, like many other Silicon Valley giants, sees TikTok as an existential threat, a threat that must be neutralized. Do you know what Meta has been doing about it? Lobbying against TikTok. And this lobbying campaign specifically targets TikTok for its handling of user data. In response, TikTok has hired lobbyists of its own, at least 40 of them, 40. In America, that's the way to influence policy and public opinion. Nobody asks about conflict of interest. All you have to do is to lobby lawmakers. It's all legal. And honestly, the concerns about TikTok are not exaggerated. But the Western response, especially the American response, does look motivated. Is it really about data security? Or is it to secure the business interests of Silicon Valley players? The West can learn from India, perhaps. India banned TikTok way back in 2020, a blanket ban, but its reasons were quite different. It was done to punish China right after the violent Galwan Valley clashes. And TikTok was not the only Chinese app to be banned. Hundreds of Chinese apps faced action in India. But coming back to the case of the West, yes, your data might not be safe with TikTok, but is it safe with American tech companies? If you believe that, I've got a rock to sell to you. Not only do American big tech giants have access to users' data, they even sell this data to third-party clients. That is how you see personalized ads and content on Facebook, Instagram, and Google. But the US is not bothered about domestic thieves. It has identified the enemy, and it's TikTok. Now let's talk about the other war, the one in Ukraine. Russia is closing in on a big prize, the city of Bakhmut. It is in the east. The battle for Bakhmut began 6 months ago. Russian forces are trying to take it, and they could be close. President Zelensky of Ukraine is worried.
Of course, I'm constantly in touch with our commanders. Special attention is paid to the situation in the east, especially in the Donetsk region. In the Bakhmut sector, the situation is constantly becoming more difficult. The enemy is constantly destroying everything that can be used to protect our positions for fortification and defense.
З усіма воїнами і фахівцями наших повітряних сил вже роблять велику роботу.
That doesn't inspire confidence. The commander of Ukraine's ground forces spoke out too. He says the situation in Bakhmut is quote-unquote extremely tense. In fact, tensions were high in Russia too. Flights to St. Petersburg were suddenly suspended. Russia shut down the airspace around the city. This was after reports of an unidentified drone. Meanwhile, Ukraine is receiving more visitors. Yesterday, it was the US Treasury Secretary's turn. Janet Yellen. Why was she in Ukraine? To discuss the rollout of a fresh aid package. The US is giving $1.25 billion in economic aid to Ukraine.
And today I'm proud to announce the transfer of an additional amount of over $1.2 billion. That's the first tranche of about $10 billion in direct budget support that the United States will provide in the coming months.
But like the past year proved, money will not be enough. It might help Ukraine continue the fight, but it will not end the war. Russia has ruled out any prospects of a truce. It wants to settle this on the battlefield. The Kremlin was referring to the Chinese peace plan. Beijing released it last week. The West has rejected it. Ukraine wants to discuss it. And now Russia has shot it down. It's a 12-point document. It calls for a ceasefire and security guarantees for Russia. This is what China has proposed, but Moscow is not interested.
Any attempts to develop plans that will contribute to bringing peace to this conflict deserve attention. We are giving the plan suggested by our Chinese friends a great deal of attention. As for the details, of course, the details should be the subject of careful analysis, taking into account the interests of all the very different parties. This is a very long and intense process. We repeat once again that, at the moment, we do not see any prerequisites for this whole story to head in the direction of peace. The special military operation continues.
The special military operation continues. With those words, the fate of China's peace plan was sealed. Neither the West nor Russia is interested, but Beijing has not stopped trying. Today, China welcomed a key ally of Putin, Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus. He is on a 3-day visit to China. Xi Jinping extended a personal invitation to Lukashenko. China and Belarus are upgrading their relationship. There's a new name for it, an all-weather comprehensive strategic relationship. That's how Beijing and Minsk describe their ties now. Is this a step towards armed support for Russia? China is not revealing its cards yet, but Lukashenko has shown his hand. Just before he left for Beijing, this is what he said.
Despite
unprecedented sanctions, we produce sufficient quantities of weaponry and military material to meet the needs of the Belarusian army. This is due to the fact that all we need in terms of military hardware, we easily receive from Russia. But as far as microelectronics, optical electronics, optics, etc. are concerned, thank you to those who preserved the legacy of the Soviet Union. Then therefore, together with Russia, we are capable of manufacturing any type of weapon.
Russia and Belarus can make any weapon together. That's a strong statement of support. But the timing may be a little off. Just yesterday, a Russian military plane in Belarus was targeted. It was targeted by an anti-government group. They used drones to attack the plane. Nevertheless, Lukashenko seems unaffected. Is he dropping a hint here? Was his statement a message for Beijing? Will China be willing to take that step, form an alliance with Belarus and Russia? A new axis against the West. Chinese diplomats won't share the specifics, but they continue to target the US.
中国在乌克兰问题上坚持客观公正立场。
China has adhered to an objective and just stance on the Ukraine issue. It has been actively committed to promoting peace talks and pushing for political settlement. Yet the United States has continued to fan the flame and fuel the fight by handing over more weaponry. It has provided Ukraine with over $32 billion in military aid, including large amounts of advanced weapons and equipment.
The United States is not stepping back either. It is maintaining pressure on Beijing. China likes to say that it's neutral. It is a neutral player in this war, but Washington disagrees. It says China is neither neutral nor an honest broker in this conflict.
We are concerned that the PRC is contemplating providing lethal assistance to Russia for Russia's use in Ukraine for a number of reasons, including for the impact it would have on the battlefield inside Ukraine, but also because the PRC has attempted to maintain this veneer of neutrality. The PRC has told the world that essentially it is not taking a position, but rather it has tried to portray itself as an honest broker. In word and in deed, however, the PRC has been anything but an honest broker.
America's attacks are unsparing. It wants to deter China from sharing arms with Russia. Moscow has decided to hit back with a new claim. The Russian Defense Ministry held a press conference today, and you have to listen to what they said. They said the US might deploy chemical weapons in Ukraine and launch a chemical attack. Moscow held a PowerPoint presentation. It said it had details about the plans, the exact dates of delivery. Russia claims to know when Ukraine will get these chemical weapons and their antidote. There was also a mention of a former American ambassador to Russia.
On February 22nd, an influential American NGO held a conference on events in Ukraine. Speaking at the event, a former US ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, said, and I quote, "Russian troops plan to deploy chemical weapons in the area of the special military operation. We regard this information as an intention of the United States themselves and their accomplices to carry out a provocation in Ukraine using toxic chemicals."
It does sound like a serious claim, also one that's hard to verify. But one thing is quite clear. The war is taking dangerous turns. Last week, Putin escalated the nuclear threat, and now there's talk of chemical weapons. We hope this does not get out of hand. Meanwhile, in Nepal, things are getting out of hand. The government is falling apart. There's high political drama. The fragile coalition, barely 2 months old, has broken. None of this is new to Nepal. But that's hardly a consolation. They say politics makes strange bedfellows. Nepal is a textbook example. Strange alliances have been stitched up to take power, only to be broken in a few days or weeks or months. We'll tell you about this in detail, but first let's bring you up to speed with the current crisis. At the center of the drama is this man, Pushp Kamal Dahal, also known as Prachand. He is the Prime Minister right now. He stitched a 7-party coalition to come to power, 7 parties. And that was barely 2 months ago. And now 3 of his allies have walked out of the government. This includes his largest ally, the party led by former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. Why did they leave? Oli's party says Prachand's behavior made it difficult for them to continue.
The Prime Minister directed the Foreign Minister to cancel her foreign trip. It did not seem appropriate to us to stay in the government after he asked to leave the government voluntarily or work as a minister without portfolio. So the party has decided to leave the government and withdraw our support.
So what really happened? You see, the election for Nepal's next president is due. It is scheduled for the 9th of March. The opposition fielded Ram Chandra Paudel as its candidate. Oli's party fielded a man called Subhash Nembang. And here's the twist. When the time to offer formal support came, Prachand picked the opposition's candidate. Basically, he ditched his own ally, KP Sharma Oli. And that has left them angry. Prachand has been accused of betraying the understanding among all his allies. But then again, why did Prachand do it? Why did he jump ship? Reports say he wanted a national consensus among all parties, a consensus to share posts like president and vice president amicably. But his idea was shot down by Oli. Now, with Prachand's latest experiment in tatters, another party is back in the game. It's called the Nepali Congress. It's the single largest party in Nepal's parliament, led by another former Prime Minister, Sher Bahadur Deuba. He is now critical to the survival of this government. Without his support, the Prime Minister will not be able to continue. And the Prime Minister will face a no-confidence vote. So that's where things stand right now, which brings us to the larger problem in Nepal's politics. It's basically a game of musical chairs and the unabashed hunger for power. A bunch of leaders take turns to lead the country. Then they fight, the government falls, the chaos continues, and the people pay the price for it. You see, Nepal has a checkered political history. Unstable government is the norm. Sample this. Since the year 2008, which is when Nepal became a republic, it has seen 11 prime ministers. In the last 8 years alone, 7 governments have changed. 7 governments in 8 years. And every change follows the same pattern. Power has been concentrated in the hands of 3 individuals. Who are these people? First is Pushp Kamal Dahal, who heads the Communist Party of Nepal, the Maoist Centre faction. He's been Prime Minister twice, and this is his 3rd stint. Then there's KP Sharma Oli. He heads the Marxist-Leninist faction of the Nepal Communist Party. He's been Prime Minister twice too. And then there's Sher Bahadur Deuba, again a 2-time Prime Minister and leader of the Nepali Congress. None of them has completed a full term in power, not one Prime Minister. And that's because they're busy toppling the other person's government. Take this current government, for instance. The Nepalese general elections last year threw up a hung parliament. There was no clear winner, meaning no party had a clear majority. Prachand won 32 seats. He was reportedly in talks with Deuba's party to form a government. Deuba was all set to be the next Prime Minister of Nepal, but then Prachand dumped him at the 11th hour, and he went with KP Sharma Oli to become the Prime Minister himself.
I'm feeling very happy and proud. There's a lot of responsibility and challenges. I've felt this.
Feeling happy and proud, he said. But what about the people of Nepal? What does this political drama cost them? You see, voters vote for a stable government, hoping to see stable governance in return. But if power-hungry leaders are busy breaking and making alliances, what can one expect? You may remember these visuals. They're from last month. 72 people died in Nepal's worst aviation accident in 3 decades. Reports say it was due to an engine problem, but this accident also highlighted the negligence by Nepal's political class, how lack of reform and action is killing the aviation sector, and that too in a country that depends so heavily on tourism. Which brings us to Nepal's economy, crashing like its planes. The Nepali rupee is weakening against the US dollar. Banks are struggling to recover loans. I could go on, but you get the point. Prachand may or may not survive the latest political turmoil, but power-hungry politicians are taking a toll on the country. The Prime Minister may change, the story may not. Someone said politics is everything, and they were right. It touches everything, even dates. You know the fruit of the date palm? Dates are now the target of a campaign. Muslims in Europe are being told to boycott Israeli dates to avoid breaking their Ramadan fasts with what's being called the taste of racism. If successful, this campaign would hurt Israel. It's a big producer of dates. 50% of its exports go to Europe. And this is not the first time Israel is being targeted in this fashion. So who's behind this campaign? Have such campaigns in the past worked? And what's Israel's response? Here's a report. Ahead of Ramadan, a protest is brewing in Europe. A protest against Israeli dates. Muslims across the continent are being encouraged to avoid dates from Israel. They're being asked to not break their fasts with what's being called the taste of racism. The campaign is called Check the Label. It urges people to check the labels of the dates they're buying. If the label says the fruits come from Israel, consumers should put them back on the shelf. But why dates? Because of their symbolic importance to Muslims. They're traditionally eaten at sunset during Ramadan to break the daylight fast. This campaign has been launched by a UK-based NGO called Friends of Al-Aqsa. They're urging people to send a clear message to Israel. This is their way of condemning what they call Israel's illegal occupation and apartheid in Palestine. They aim to hit Israel's coffers to hurt them. And if this movement gains traction, it actually could. The global trade in dates is worth almost $2 billion. Israel is among the top 5 exporters. 50% of Israel dates are exported to Europe. The UK, the Netherlands, France, Spain and Italy import huge quantities of these dates. In 2020, the UK imported dates worth about $9 million from Israel. The boycott organizers believe the Muslim community plays a huge role here. They say a large proportion of that income comes from buying dates during Ramadan. About 7% of the population in Britain is Muslim. and together they can harm the lucrative Israeli industry. This boycott call also comes at a time of increased violence between Israel and Palestine. Just yesterday, Palestinian attackers carried out several drive-by shootings in Jericho. An Israeli American was shot dead in the incident. Earlier, there was a rampage by Jewish settlers in West Bank's Palestinian villages. One Palestinian civilian was killed and dozens of cars and homes burned. 67 Palestinians have been killed just this year. This includes 13 children. That's one child death every 5 days. On the Israeli side, 14 people have been killed. Last year saw the highest number of deaths in years. More than 150 Palestinians and over 20 Israelis were killed in the West Bank and Israel. The British NGO has accused Israel of apartheid crimes. And a date boycott is their response. But it's not the first time a boycott like this has been tried. Last year, Unilever sold the ice cream brand Ben & Jerry's to a local licensee in Israel and the West Bank. A month later, the ice cream company filed a lawsuit. They said they no longer want to sell their products in the occupied West Bank. The ice cream war got a strong response from Israel, though the matter was later resolved. As for the Check the Label campaign, it was tried before too, over a decade ago. The Israeli ambassador to the UK then had the perfect response to it. He said, "Whilst others choose to export hate, Israel will continue to successfully export dates." Meanwhile, the French president is planning a reset. Macron will travel to Africa this week. Yesterday, he tried to set the tone for his visit. Macron said France will cut back on its troops in Africa, and French military bases in the continent will see a change.
Basically, the logic is that our model must no longer be that of military bases as they exist today. In the future, our presence will be in bases, schools and academies that will be co-managed. They will be staffed by French personnel who will remain, albeit at lower levels, and by African personnel. And they will also be able to welcome other partners if our African partners so wish, and on their terms.
Macron is making a fresh outreach. He wants France to demonstrate what he calls profound humility, but it's easier said than done. As president, Macron will be visiting Africa for the 18th time. He plans to make 4 stops: Angola, Gabon, Republic of Congo, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The French president has promised, or had promised, a partnership of equals to Africa. But so far, he's not been able to deliver it. You see, just like the UK, France had a vast colonial empire. Nearly half of the African nations were under French influence and control. They were either colonies or protectorates. These are the former French colonies. Post-independence, France maintained some influence on them, but it's now declining. In recent years, France has been at the receiving end. It has faced sharp criticism. The anti-colonial sentiment has always been there, but recent events accelerated the trend. Consider what happened in Mali in April last year. The French military had to leave the country. What were the French forces doing there? They were fighting Islamist militants. The operation began in the year 2013. It went on for 8 years and it ended in a rather humiliating fashion for France. The French forces became deeply unpopular. On their watch, the number of terror attacks increased steadily and more people joined militant groups. Basically, France could not solve the problem. It may have only made it worse. So it left. Guess who replaced the French soldiers? The Wagner group from Russia. They have been tasked with fighting the militants now. And Mali is just one example. Then we have Senegal. In 2021, protests broke out in Senegal. Young people took to the streets. They smashed windows of French gas stations and set fire to French supermarkets. Why were the protesters angry? Because they believed that their president was a puppet of Macron. In the same year, a French convoy was blocked in Niger. 2 people were killed in the unrest. Last year, there was a coup in Burkina Faso. The anti-France sentiment was visible there too. Protesters tore up French flags. For President Macron, strong ties with Africa are a priority, but his Africa policy has not really worked. In fact, it has proven to be counterproductive. So perhaps for the last time, he's attempting another reset. He's taking a different approach this time. He wants to cut back on the military presence and build on the cultural ties.
Pour éviter la répétition de l'histoire, Il existe une autre voie.
To avoid repeating history, there is another path, the one we've been pursuing for the past 6 years. Another path that consists in not reducing Africa to a field of competition or profits, and in considering African countries as partners with whom we have shared interests and responsibilities. We need to build a new balanced, mutual and responsible relationship.
Équilibré, réciproque et responsable.
A reasonable relationship, that's what Macron is promising, but can he really deliver it? The world is watching his next move. And now to some positive news. Has the world found a cure for HIV/AIDS? The trends are encouraging. A fifth person has been cured of HIV. Remember, this disease was once thought to be incurable. A fifth success story is indeed promising. But don't start writing obituaries for contraceptive companies just yet. The cure is complicated. All the patients, including the latest one, suffered from both cancer and HIV. They were cured after undergoing stem cell transplantation. The cure is a cancer treatment that has the side effect of curing HIV. And of course, the procedure is both risky and extremely expensive. Despite all this, it's positive news, we say, and something to cheer about. Here's more.
Another person has been cured of HIV. This brings the number up to 5. The patient is a 53-year-old German man, codenamed the Dusseldorf patient to protect his privacy. He, like all the others who've been cured, suffered from both HIV and cancer. He underwent a stem cell transplantation surgery in 2013 to treat his cancer. The transplantation happened to cure his HIV. In 2019, the Dusseldorf patient stopped taking his HIV treatment. Now, 4 years later, doctors have declared that he's HIV-free. It isn't just a long remission, he's been cured. So how does the cure work? Let's start with the basics. HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. It's a virus that attacks our body's immune system, rendering it all but useless. When this happens, the patient is said to suffer from AIDS, or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. HIV and AIDS are not synonyms. HIV is the virus. It can be contained. Contracting HIV was a death sentence in the 1980s. That was the peak of the global HIV/AIDS epidemic. Now, people use medicines to keep the virus in check. It's called antiretroviral therapy. This therapy can contain HIV, stop people from passing it on, and generally help patients live an almost normal life. But HIV still could not be cured. That's where the new cure comes in. You see, some people in the world are almost completely immune to HIV. It's because of a genetic mutation. It prevents the virus from affecting a person's immune system. So doctors take the cells from such a person and transplant them in an HIV patient. It has happened in the case of all of those who've been cured. They've all had stem cell transplants. Stem cells are the cells that make your blood. They're located in the bone marrow. In all 5 cases, the stem cells from an immune person were transferred into the cancer and HIV patients.
The stem cell transplant, what it's going to do is to replace the immune cells from the patient with immune cells from the donor. And in the case of people with HIV, this means that the immune cells from the donor are going to replace and destroy the immune cells that are those carrying HIV in the patients.
If we know this works, why aren't we making this cure widely available? Because it's risky. Stem cell transplants are dangerous. They're only used on cancer patients when there are no other options. The second problem is the cost. Stem cell transplants aren't cheap. In the US, they can cost anywhere between $25,000 to even $100,000. The treatment is available in India as well, but costs between 15 to 25 lakh rupees. The third issue is finding stem cell donors who are immune to HIV. Only 1% of all humans are immune to HIV, and most of them happen to be white people. So until they start donating their stem cells, or we artificially create HIV immune stem cells, there will always be a shortage. Despite the challenges, the cure offers valuable information. It provides insights that could help us eradicate HIV.
This is clearly an exciting result, but it's not the therapeutic solution for everyone, for every person living with HIV. However, this is showing us that we have a possibility of reproduce an outcome of HIV cure using a therapeutic intervention.
While the end of HIV/AIDS may still be decades away, the latest report also brings hope to the millions living with the disease.
Now, those of us in India might be forgiven for thinking that winter is over, but that's not the case in other parts of the world. The last week has seen parts of the US covered in layers of snow. Both the east and west coasts are battling winter storms. Snow and icy rains are leaving American cities without power. Flights have been cancelled, roads are blocked, parts of the country are at a standstill. Across the Atlantic, snow is gathering in Spain as well. From Barcelona to Ibiza, winter storms are disrupting daily life. A bit further east in Croatia, hundreds have been left stranded due to the snowstorms. Our next report brings you their chilling tales.
A winter wonderland and a frozen wasteland. That's how parts of the US are being described. Winter storms are engulfing parts of the country. Some cityscapes resemble snow globes. Others resemble scenes from climate disaster movies. The snow is piling up in both the east and the west. These scenes are from Los Angeles in California. Inches of snow piling up outside houses, rooftops draped in an icy veil. The iconic Hollywood sign was shrouded in fog as the frigid storm doused the usually sunny LA. Some of America's wildlife is enjoying the snow. Animals were seen frolicking at an Oregon zoo. Bald eagles shook off the snow as they emerged from their nests. But many American people aren't having a great time.
So there's a dude who does the forecasts, and today he wrote like Armageddon, ? Because it looks like there's more snow, but who knows? Unpredictable.
The winter storm cut power lines across California. Thousands were left without electricity over the weekend. The heavy rains caused landslides. Overflowing rivers have swept away mobile homes, and the winds have caused trees to fall over and damage property.
The first time I've seen big trees like this falling down, and so many of them. Branches, the park over here has a bunch of big branches falling down. And the night that this happened, the wind was just howling.
In Nevada, strong winds and unending snow mean bulldozers are needed to clear the roads. On the other side of the country, a monster storm hammered Boston. All across the country, thousands of flights have been delayed or cancelled. Roads have become impassable. The storm is bringing life to a standstill. The winter storms are due to a cold mass of air coming from the Arctic. The air is heading south and bringing a cold wave with it. And the wave isn't just restricted to the US. Spain, the land of sun and siestas, has been gripped by the cold as well. Storm Juliet has frozen the usually balmy Barcelona. Temperatures have fallen to about minus 18 degrees in the Catalonia region. 30 provinces in the country are under a cold weather alert. The winter storm has even reached Spain's Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean. Strong winds and huge waves are buffeting the tourist locales of Mallorca and Ibiza. Speaking of tourism hotspots, Croatia is under the snow as well. A storm over the weekend cut off parts of the country. Hundreds were left stranded and had to camp out in their cars or cafes or shelters set up by the government.
For today, it looks like we will wait. I don't think the border will stop today. It looks like snowing still, and hopefully tomorrow. I don't know if we can leave today. I'm not sure about that.
The winter storms around the US are expected to subside this week. Things will remain frosty for a while in Spain and Croatia. Winter hasn't gone yet, and there are chances we'll see more such sights in the coming weeks.
If your idea of a great nightlife is uninterrupted REM sleep, our next story is for you. Have you heard of sleep tourism yet? The world is really waking up to it. It's become the biggest trend in the hotel industry. So what does sleep tourism really mean? It refers to a holiday where the primary focus is your sleep. It can include everything from the place you stay at to the activities you engage in. They're all aimed at a good night's rest for you. Who knew that sleep could be the hottest new service? And hotels are not sleeping on the trend. They're doing much more than placing eye masks and earplugs on bedside tables. Let me give you examples. A hotel in New York has opened a restorative sleep suite. It has an AI-powered bed with sleep-enhancing amenities. The bed dynamically adjusts to relieve pressure points. It even controls the climate through various sleep stages. And the next morning, it submits a sleep report, believe it or not. London too has a sleep-centric hotel. It has innovative soundproofing and a sleep concierge. In Paris, a hotel has a zero-gravity chair, apparently to give you better rest in anti-gravity style. And in Portugal, there's Sleep Spa Hotel, secluded from the chaos of the city. There are more on the list. Hotels with sleep-inducing meditation recording, a pillow menu, weighted blankets, and special bedtime tea. And all of this simply to enhance sleep. And as you can tell, these are still luxury services, but experts say most hotels could soon make sleep a priority, which begs the question, why has sleep suddenly become a big focus for the travel industry? How many of you would go on a vacation just to sleep? It's unconventional. Traveling was supposed to be about adventure, about immersing yourself in new cultures, new cuisines, new experiences. Yet more and more people are now traveling just to sleep better. And for the hotel industry, battered by the pandemic, this is wonderful news. Let me show you some data from 2020. In the US, 70% of the hotel staff was laid off. 80% of hotel rooms remained empty. The industry saw a 50% revenue decline. Same with India. The sector lost some $16 billion in revenue. In the UK, the loss was $156 billion. This is the story across the world. Now, hotels are thinking of new ways to attract guests. And you know what most guests complain about? Poor sleep. The pandemic has ruined our sleep, and I'm not speaking metaphorically. Reports of insomnia are on the rise. So much so that pandemic-induced sleep deprivation has its own name. It's called coronasomnia. A study was conducted across 50 countries. More than 40% of the respondents reported loss of sleep after COVID. 40%. So for the struggling hotel industry, this was the perfect pitch. A hotel for a good night's sleep. And it has clicked. People aren't traveling at the cost of sleep anymore. They're paying to get it. Plus, there's more awareness about sleep, why you need it, and how lack of it can cause irritability, tiredness, anxiety, even depression. So a getaway to get good sleep may be a good idea. But it's not a long-term solution, really. You can't undo the harms of poor sleep over a long period of time by one sleep holiday. Also remember, humans have slept without scented pillows and weighted blankets for centuries. Instead of AI, we had fresh sheets. Instead of a sleep concierge, we had family members with a strict no lights past bedtime rule. So it all depends on you, really. Different things work for different people at different stages in life. Go on the holiday by all means, but work on your routine beyond it. In this hustle culture, avoiding sleep comes at a heavy cost. In some cases, it could be a hefty hotel bill, because sometimes the ultimate luxury is just a good night's rest. And finally, it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with the UK, northern lights lit up the night sky in southern England. They are seen in Scotland, but rarely ever spotted in the UK's south. In Greece, people participated in a flower war, much like the Indian festival of Holi. People had fun with colors there. In Singapore, women are ruling the male-dominated sport of wrestling. And finally, Courtney Cox, the actor who played Monica in Friends, got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her on-screen and off-screen best friends, Jennifer Aniston, who played Rachel, and Lisa Kudrow, who played Phoebe, were there to support her. Could there be a better end to tonight's show, we say? Leaving you with the visuals. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.